Smoke clung to the air so thick it stung the back of the throat, and the corridors of the bunker echoed with the ragged rhythm of boots, shouted orders, and the hiss of failing vents. Colin Barrett shoved his shoulder against a half-collapsed bulkhead and felt the heat searing through his gloves. Behind him, 2 medics carried a stretcher at a dead run, the wounded man on it barely conscious, his chest rising in short, frantic bursts. "This whole level's compromised," Megan Calloway snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chaos. She was hauling a crate of ammo that should have taken 2 men to lift, face streaked with soot and sweat. "If that fire breaks containment, we're all ash in minutes." Colin didn't answer right away. His ears still rang from the last impact, the memory of the explosion above ground fresh enough that his stomach twisted. He pressed against the bulkhead until it gave way, creating just enough of an opening for the medics to push through. He caught Megan's eyes then, saw the unspoken question there. How much longer could they keep patching holes in a ship that was already sinking? The bunker shuddered again, dust falling in clouds from the ceiling. Somewhere deep in the complex, alarms wailed with a mechanical shriek that didn't stop, only shifted pitch as systems failed one by one. Victor Hanlon appeared from the far end of the corridor, limping, his arm in a makeshift sling. His engineer's uniform was torn to threads, and his face was smeared with grease and dried blood. But in his good hand he clutched a tablet like it was the only thing worth saving. "They're pulling back," he said, voice rough. He didn't shout it, but in the silence that fell, it carried like a verdict. "Empire ships are leaving orbit." Megan let out a disbelieving laugh, sharp and bitter. "Leaving? After 15 days of pounding us into rubble?" Victor's eyes flicked to Colin. "It doesn't make sense. We should be finished. They had us down to the bone." He held up the tablet, its cracked screen flickering with intercepted signals. "But the chatter I caught says their fleets are redeploying to other sectors. Not regrouping. Redeploying. Something's wrong on their end." Colin exhaled slowly, the smoke burning his lungs. The idea sounded insane, yet he could feel the tension ripple through the survivors around them. Men and women who had been bracing for the final blow now stared like someone had cracked open a door they thought was welded shut forever. "They broke us in 15 days, Megan said, her voice softer now, less certain. "Half our fleet's gone. Cities burned. Millions dead. And now they're leaving." Victor shifted his weight, grimacing against the pain in his arm. "Or maybe they don't have a choice. Maybe the Empire's bleeding somewhere else." Colin studied the both of them. Megan, strong and angry, ready to fight even when her body screamed for rest. Victor, wounded and hollow-eyed, but clinging to scraps of information like a drowning man to driftwood. And himself, standing between them, commander of nothing more than the few hundred still alive in this bunker. He wanted to tell them it didn't matter, that survival was all they could hope for. But the silence stretched, filled with the hiss of fire suppression systems and the low hum of dying machinery. The truth pressed in heavier than the smoke. If the Empire was faltering, even for a moment, then humanity's war wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Colin finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "If they're bleeding, we make them bleed more." Megan's jaw tightened. Victor's lips curved into a ghost of a smile, equal parts grim and reckless. Around them, the exhausted survivors straightened just slightly, as though the bunker itself had drawn a breath it hadn't dared take in days. And for the first time since the war began, Colin felt the faintest flicker of something dangerous, something he hadn't let himself feel since day one. The makeshift command room was a cavern of shadows, lit by the weak glow of half-broken consoles and the blue shimmer of a single holomap. Around it, a dozen survivors huddled, wrapped in scorched uniforms and smoke-stained jackets, their eyes sunken but unblinking. They weren't soldiers anymore, not really. They were just the ones who hadn't died yet. Colin Barrett stood at the head of the table, both hands pressed against the flickering projection. He let the silence drag, feeling every gaze on him. Behind his shoulder, Megan Calloway leaned against the wall, arms crossed, the impatience in her posture radiating like heat. Victor Hanlon sat on a crate near the back, his injured arms strapped tight, the tablet balanced on his knees as though it was the only thing keeping him upright. "The Empire thinks we're finished," Colin said finally, his voice carrying steady despite the gravel in his throat. And maybe we should be. But if Victor's right, they've got fires breaking out in their own house. Fires they don't want anyone to see. Victor's lips twitched into a tired smirk. Interception logs don't lie. They've pulled 3 fleets out of this sector, redirected to somewhere deeper inside Imperial territory. That doesn't happen unless they're stretched thin. Someone else is hitting them. Megan pushed off the wall, her boots scraping against the cracked floor. So what? We can barely breathe down here without choking. You want us to go picking fights with the same fleets that burned half our systems to glass? We hit them where it hurts, Colin said. Not their fleets. Their supplies. If they're stretched thin, every shipment matters. Cut their fuel lines, their food convoys, their ammunition runs. We make survival for them as costly as it's been for us. The room murmured, half hopeful, half horrified. One of the younger survivors, a pilot named Reeves, shook his head. That's suicide. We've got, one working ship? And it's patched together from spare parts. We won't last 5 minutes against an escort. Colin didn't answer right away. He could feel Megan's eyes burning into him, waiting for him to back down. Instead, he looked at Victor. You pulled the logs. Can you find a convoy? Something light, vulnerable? Victor adjusted the tablet with his good hand, the screen casting a faint glow across his face. I already did. A munitions hauler, 2 days out, with a single cutter escort. Standard patrol route, predictable jump points. If we had a ship that didn't look like it had been welded back together by drunks, we could intercept it. Megan barked a laugh, sharp and humorless. You've lost your minds. You're talking about poking a giant that just finished kicking our teeth in. You think one stolen convoy will change anything? Colin looked at her. No. But it will remind them we're still here. Remind us we're still here. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Megan's shoulders tensed, her jaw working. Then she shook her head, muttering under her breath, but she didn't argue further. 2 days later, the survivors stood on the hangar deck, staring at the battered frigate that would carry them into open space. The hull was scarred, one engine still limped when pushed too hard, and every system beeped warnings more often than not. But it flew, and that was enough. Victor walked the length of the ship with a mechanic's eye, tapping at exposed panels, making notes on his tablet. Megan stood at the ramp, strapping down crates of scavenged weapons. Colin climbed aboard last, pausing only once to look back at the men and women who were about to gamble what little they had left. The launch was rough, the frigate rattling like it might shake apart before clearing the upper atmosphere. But when the stars stretched out before them, silent and endless, a weight seemed to lift off the crew. For the first time since the war began, they weren't running. The intercept came quicker than Colin expected. The convoy drifted into view, the munitions hauler fat and sluggish, the escort cutter circling with mechanical precision. The survivors fell silent at the sight, breath held as the plan balanced on the edge of a knife. Victor muttered over the comms, voice tight. Their scans are pinging us. We're about to lose the disguise. Hold course, Colin ordered, though his throat was dry as dust. The cutter shifted. Its weapons charged. Warnings flared across the frigate's console. Megan slammed a fist against the side rail, cursing. And then the first shots lit up the void, streaks of plasma ripping toward them. Evasive! Colin shouted, bracing as the frigate pitched hard. Metal screamed, alarms wailed, and for an instant it felt like the ship would tear itself apart. Megan's voice cut through the chaos. Colin, this is suicide. He gritted his teeth, eyes fixed on the target. Not if we hit first. Cliffhanger ending. The frigate lunges straight into the cutter's line of fire, Megan scrambling to line up weapons, Victor swearing over failing systems. Victory or death hangs on a single desperate strike. The cutter's plasma rounds raked across their shields, jolting the frigate hard enough to send Victor sprawling against the console. Sparks burst from an overhead panel and showered the deck in orange light. Megan slammed herself into the gunnery controls, teeth gritted, hair clinging to her sweat-streaked face. Shields are paper-thin, Victor barked, coughing as smoke curled around him. One more direct hit and we'll be space junk. Then don't give them a clean shot, Colin snapped, gripping the armrest as the ship pitched violently. His eyes locked on the munitions hauler beyond, slow and lumbering, its cargo bays swollen with enough ordnance to arm a fleet. Megan's fingers danced over the firing controls, her jaw clenched so tight he thought her teeth might crack. Hold her steady, I can't hit a damn thing with you juking like this. Colin steadied the frigate, just for a heartbeat, and Megan took it. Twin lances of plasma spat from their cannons, streaking across the void and slamming into the cutter's side. The enemy ship reeled, armor blistering under the impact, but it didn't fall. It came back harder, spitting fire that rocked their hull until the walls screamed. "Engines overheating!" Victor yelled, his good hand flying across the tablet as he tried to reroute cooling systems. "We can't outrun it, Colin. Either we cripple them now or we're dead." Colin's mind churned. He had one chance, maybe. "Megan, we don't take the cutter head-on. We aim for its engines. Disable, don't destroy. Once it's dead in the water, the hauler's ours." Megan shot him a look that bordered on madness. "That'll put us nose to nose. If we miss, we'll be debris." "Then don't miss." The frigate lurched forward, the stars blurring as Colin forced every ounce of thrust from their battered engines. The cutter loomed larger and larger, its weapons bay glowing as it prepared another strike. Colin's knuckles went white on the controls. "Now, Megan." She squeezed the trigger, the cannons roaring to life. Plasma fire tore through the void, smashing straight into the cutter's rear thrusters. For a split second, Colin thought they had failed, the glow of its engines still burning hot. Then, like a candle snuffed in the wind, they went dark. The cutter spun out of formation, helpless. The bridge erupted in ragged cheers. Even Victor, coughing hard enough to spit blood, let out a shaky laugh. But Colin didn't celebrate. His eyes were on the hauler. A ship that size should have already jumped away once its escort fell. Instead, it stayed put, drifting like bait left out for a fool to bite. Megan's grin faded as she saw the same thing. "That's wrong. Too easy." Victor squinted at his tablet, the cracked screen flickering. They didn't broadcast for reinforcements either. Not once. Like they knew they wouldn't need them. A cold knot twisted in Colin's gut. He pushed the frigate closer, tension coiled tight in his chest. The hauler's docking lights blinked as if an invitation. Too clean. Too precise. "Colin," Megan said quietly, eyes narrowed on the looming ship. "I don't like this." He didn't either. Every instinct screamed trap, but the cargo, if it was real, could feed their resistance for months. Could give them a chance at more than just surviving. "Victor," Colin asked, never taking his eyes off the hauler, "can you crack its systems before we dock? Tell me if this thing's loaded with anything other than munitions." Victor's fingers flew, his breathing uneven. He muttered curses under his breath, tapped harder, then froze. "What is it?" Megan demanded. Victor lifted his head slowly, his face pale under the blood and grime. "It's broadcasting on an encrypted Imperial channel. Not hauling weapons. Hauling something else." Colin leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "What is it carrying?" Victor swallowed hard. "Coordinates. To somewhere they don't want anyone finding. This whole convoy was bait. And we just bit down." The deck groaned as the hauler's cargo bay doors began to open, revealing not crates of munitions, but rows of sleek, sealed pods glowing with a cold, unnatural light. Colin's breath caught. Megan muttered a curse, backing away from the viewport. Whatever the Empire had left floating in the dark, they hadn't just stumbled across it. It was waiting for them. The pods glowed like coffins adrift in the black, their curved shells faintly humming as the hauler's cargo bay yawned wider. The light reflected off the cracked glass of the frigate's viewport, painting Colin's face in cold blue. He didn't speak at first. He just stared, jaw locked, trying to quiet the hammering in his chest. Megan broke the silence, her voice tight. "That's not munitions. That's not anything I've ever seen on an Imperial hauler." Victor hunched over his tablet, his good hand trembling as he pushed through the encrypted channels. Data spilled in broken lines across the flickering screen. He muttered, half to himself, "It's not cargo. It's storage." Stasis locks. Something alive, or something meant to stay asleep. The frigate drifted closer. The pods loomed until they filled the viewport, stretching row after row, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Each one shimmered faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Megan's hand hovered over the weapon's control. Tell me if I should blow it to hell right now, Colin, because every second we sit here feels wrong. Colin leaned forward, squinting at the pods, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. Wait, if they're broadcasting coordinates, maybe it's not just about what's in there. Maybe it's about where these things are meant to go. Victor's voice cracked, raw with exhaustion. I'm already seeing it. Cross-referencing the signal against their fleet movements. The Empire's been pulling back from sectors near these coordinates. They're scared of something. And I think this is it. Megan barked a humorless laugh. Scared? The same bastards who turned our cities into glass in 15 days? No, this isn't fear. This is control. Whatever's in those pods, they plan on unleashing it. The air on the bridge felt heavier. Colin's mind raced through possibilities, bioweapons, experimental soldiers, or worse, something not even imperial. His throat went dry. We're taking one, he said finally. Megan's head snapped toward him. Are you out of your mind? He didn't answer. He just keyed the controls, aligning their docking clamps with the hauler's bay. Megan lunged at him, slamming her hand against the console to cut the command. Colin, listen to yourself. We're held together with duct tape and luck. You bring one of those things on board and it could be the end of us all. Victor lifted his head, his pale face lit by the flicker of his screen. If we don't, we'll never know what the Empire's hiding. And if this is the reason they've left us alive, then it's already the end of us. Better we know what we're facing than sit in the dark. Megan glared at him, but the certainty in Victor's tone silenced her. She turned back to Colin, eyes burning. You're supposed to keep us alive. That's it. Not gamble with things we don't understand. Colin looked at her, really looked, seeing the soot streaks on her face, the frayed straps of her armor, the anger masking exhaustion and fear. He wanted to tell her she was right. But the war had taught him too many times that survival without knowledge was just dying later. He gave the order. The frigate shuddered as the docking clamps bit. The hiss of pressurization filled the corridors. Megan stood rigid, her hand resting on the grip of her rifle as if sheer will might stop whatever was about to come through. Victor kept his eyes on the tablet, knuckles white. Colin drew his sidearm, more for the comfort of the weight than for any real confidence it would help. The hatch cycled open. Cold air rushed in, carrying with it a sterile, chemical tang. They stepped into the hauler's bay, boots echoing against the steel. The pods lined both sides, their faint blue glow painting the walls. Up close, the hum was louder, like a low vibration through the bones. Colin approached one, his reflection warped across the glass. Inside, shapes shifted in the murky suspension, too indistinct to define. His skin prickled as he leaned closer, the vague outline of something humanoid pressing faintly against the glass. Victor's voice was hoarse. Stasis. It's holding something that was never meant to wake up here. These pods aren't built by the Empire. Look at the interface. This is older. Much older. Megan swallowed hard. So what are they doing with it? Before Victor could answer, the pod shuddered. A crack splintered across its glass, spiderwebbing outward with a sound like breaking ice. Megan yanked her rifle to her shoulder. Colin. But the crack didn't spread. The glow flickered, then stabilized as though the pod had repaired itself. Colin exhaled slowly, heart still hammering. Victor looked down at his tablet, his face ashen. I think it responded to us. To our proximity. Megan swore under her breath and backed up. This is insane. We should torch the whole bay now before. The tablet beeped, cutting her off. Victor stared at the screen, then at Colin. The pods aren't just stasis. They're sending signals. Not to each other. To somewhere else. Colin felt his stomach sink. Where? Victor turned the screen, the coordinates glowing against the fractured display. A system on the fringe. Empty, according to Imperial records. But they've cordoned it off with fleets. Whatever's in there, it's where these things came from. Megan's voice was a low growl. So this is it. The Empire didn't pull back because they were bleeding. They pulled back because they're trying to keep this buried. Colin stared at the coordinates, a cold weight settling in his chest. They had chased a convoy for scraps, and instead they had stumbled into the Empire's deepest fear. Behind him, the pod throbbed once more with faint light, pulsing like a heartbeat. And somewhere in the dark beyond known space, something answered. The Imperial fortress world of Dravenar looked like a cage of light suspended in orbit, its defense grid stretching outward in layers, thousands of cannons trained on the void. For 2 centuries no enemy had ever breached its shield. The Galactic Empire called it unbreakable. Colin Barrett knew it was exactly where humanity had to strike. Every ship in the human fleet drifted in silence, hidden in the gravity shadow of a burned-out star. The crews had stripped meals down to nutrient paste and let recycling systems work overtime just to keep enough energy for engines. Men and women who had not slept properly in weeks sat strapped at their stations, running on little more than caffeine and desperation. Even so, there was a strange calm now, the quiet that comes before something irreversible. Colin stood inside the command chamber, the weight of command pressing against his spine. His uniform smelled faintly of burnt plastic from the last engagement, and his hands were scarred from pulling survivors out of a ruptured bulkhead 3 days earlier. He carried those scars like reminders. Across from him, Megan Calloway was reviewing strike paths with her pilots, her voice steady but her eyes shadowed by exhaustion. She had lost more friends than she could count, but she still spoke as if every life mattered, because to her it did. Victor Hanlon sat in the comms pit, staring at the encrypted data they had stolen from the Empire. His voice cracked when he said, "They stacked the defenses heavier on the southern hemisphere. That's where they expect us to hit." He leaned back, rubbing his face, his nerves frayed to threads. "They think they know us, Colin. They think we'll come at them like we always do, straight for the throat." Colin studied him for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Megan. She raised a brow, waiting. "So we don't," Colin finally said. His tone was steady, calm enough that both of them knew he had already decided. "We don't go for the throat. We go for the heart." The plan formed like a storm front. Instead of hammering at the strongest point, they would drive their fleet through the underbelly, past the orbital shipyards where civilians were forced into labor. It was a gamble, because saving civilians would slow them down, but it would also send a message that the Empire could never bury. Humanity was not here for survival alone. They were here to take back their future. The fleet moved, silent and invisible until the first cannon opened fire. What followed was chaos made of fire and steel. Megan's squadron dove through the defense lines, tearing holes into the grid, ships vanishing in bursts of light but still holding formation. Victor shouted over comms, rerouting the encryption, feeding false signals into the enemy's net. He coughed through smoke when a console exploded, refusing to leave his station. Colin watched the tactical screen collapse into red warnings, then into sudden green as one breach widened, just enough. "That's it," he breathed. "Push everything we've got through." The ships surged forward. Human voices filled the comms with curses, prayers, and laughter, the kind that only came when you had nothing left to lose. Megan's fighter was clipped by enemy fire, alarms shrieking, but she held her stick steady. Her voice came in ragged, "Not dead yet. Keep moving." Then came the moment that felt impossible. The Empire's shield fractured. The fortress world, once untouchable, lay exposed. Colin gave the order with a voice that carried centuries of rage and hope. "Hit the core." And it. Explosions rippled across Dravenar's surface, tearing apart supply lines, command hubs, and the very heart of the Empire's control. The sky lit with a brightness so fierce it painted the human fleet like silhouettes against a dying sun. But victory came at a price. Half the fleet was gone. Megan's fighter was spinning uncontrollably, vanishing into clouds of debris. Victor's last transmission cut off in static after a fire swallowed the comms pit. Colin gripped the console, refusing to believe what the silence meant. The fortress burned, collapsing under its own weight, but in the silence that followed there was no cheer, no victory cry. Just a haunting awareness that they had done the impossible, but at a cost that might break them. A survivor's voice finally came through comms, trembling. "Commander, the Empire's fleet, it's retreating. They're falling back." Colin closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he did not know he had been holding. Humanity had shattered the unbreakable. The galaxy would never see them the same again. And yet, through the smoke and fire, a new transmission cut into their channel, not imperial, not human. A voice they had never heard before, speaking in a calm, chilling rhythm. "We have observed your war. Your defiance is noted. Prepare yourselves. The true test begins now." Colin's eyes snapped open, heart-hammering. They had torn down the Empire, but something far larger had just been watching.